Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, things adjacent. I just like saying things adjacent. Somebody asked me about that on the comment section. This is a news channel. There's lots of things to talk about. Primarily, the primary thing we're talking about is climate change, but this particular video will be some climate change and some political stuff. We'll start with climate change. This is from EcoWatch. Their date on this, February 18th. That'll be yesterday, 2019. Earlier Arctic rain is leading to methane emissions going bonkers. As the global temperature steadily rises, it ensures that levels of one of the most potent greenhouse gases are increasing in a way new to science. The planet will have to reckon with more methane than expected. More than expected. Researchers who monitored one bog for 3 years in the Alaskan permafrost have identified yet another instance of what engineers call positive feedback. They found that global warming meant earlier springs, and with that, earlier spring rains. And as a consequence, the influx of warm water on what had previously been frozen ground triggered a biological frenzy that sent methane emissions soaring. One stretch of wetland in the forest of black spruce in the Alaskan interior stepped up its emissions of natural gas, another name for methane, by 30%. Methane is a greenhouse gas at least 30 times more potent than CO2. Yeah. These are from studies. This is news. This is happening. As a consequence, climate scientists may have yet to return again to the vexed question of the carbon budget in their calculations of how fast the world will warm as humans burn more fossil fuels to set up ever more rapid global warming and climate change, which will in turn accelerate the thawing of the permafrost. The evidence so far comes from a detailed study of water, energy, and carbon traffic from just one wetland, but other teams of scientists have repeatedly expressed concern over the integrity of the northern hemisphere permafrost and the vast stores of carbon preserved in the frozen soils beneath the shallow layer that comes to life with each Arctic spring. We saw the plants going crazy and methane emissions going bonkers, said Rebecca Newman, an environmental engineer in the University of Washington in Seattle, who led the study. 2016 had above average rainfall, but so did 2014. So what was different about this year? What mattered was when the rain fell. It fell earlier, when the ground was still colder than the air. The warmer water saturated the frozen forest, flowed into the bog, and created a local permafrost thaw in anoxic conditions. The subterranean microbial communities responded by converting the once frozen organic matter into highly effective greenhouse gas. Alarm rises. It'd be the bottom of the barrel in terms of energy production for them, Newman said. The microbes in this bog on some level are like, oh man, we're stuck making methane because that's all this bog is allowing us to do. As global average temperature levels creep up, so does alarm about the state of the vast tracts of permafrost, home to huge stores of frozen carbon in the form of semi-decayed plant material that could be released into the atmosphere to fuel further global warming with devastating consequences. Spring has been arriving earlier everywhere in the northern hemisphere, including the Arctic, with unpredictable impacts on high latitude ecosystems. The permafrost itself has been identified as a vulnerable region, change in which could tip the planet into a new and unpredictable climate regime, and geographers only this year have started to assess the direct hazard to the communities that live in the high latitudes as once solid ground turns to slush under their feet. More evaporation, much more difficult to assess, is how the steady attrition of the permafrost plays out in terms of the traffic of carbon between rocks, oceans, Ocean, atmosphere, and living things. Researchers are still teasing out the roles of all the agencies at work, including subterranean microbes. In a warmer world, evaporation will increase. Warmer air has a greater capacity for water vapor. In the end, it means more rain will fall. If it falls in spring or early summer, and it will. The research from one marshland in Alaska seems to suggest more methane will escape into the atmosphere, and it will. Right now, the rewards of the study are academic. They throw just a little more light on the subtle machinery of weather and climate. The test is whether what happens in one instance is likely to happen in another, similar terrain around the high latitudes. What do you guys think? What's up and down on that? The ability of rain to transport thermal energy into soils has been underappreciated, Newman said. Our study shows that by affecting soil temperature and methane emissions, rain can increase the ability of thawing permafrost to warm the climate. Yep. As though in the know say, yep. Moving on to an article close to home. More homeless people die of cold weather in LA than in New York. Hold on one second. John D. Brider was found passed out near a homeless shelter and taken to Los Angeles County USC Medical Center, where he later died. Brider, 63, had gone into cardiac arrest. And oxygen had been cut off to his brain, but another seemingly improbable factor contributed to his death last winter: hypothermia, or loss of body heat from being out in the cold. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office ruled one of the abiding myths about Los Angeles is that homeless people come here from the East Coast or Midwest because they at least won't freeze to death. And that it's actually not a myth. That's actually true. It's logical. People go to Phoenix. Phoenix has a huge homeless problem. So does LA. It's not just people from there. People come here because they know it generally doesn't get all that cold, except for this year it is getting quite cold and quite wet. But despite LA's typical sunshine and mild temperatures, 5 homeless people, including Brider, died of causes that included or were complicated by hypothermia in the county last year, surpassing San Francisco and New York City, which each reported two deaths. Over the last 3 years, 13 people have died, at least partly because of the cold, the coroner's office said, and advocates worried that this cold, rainy winter will mean more fatalities. I'm going to link that below. Well, probably also because there's less concern, people are not taking the precautions that they probably would in a colder climate. Moving on, Senator Bernie Sanders raises more than $1 million within hours of launching his 2020 presidential bid. So he's officially in the race. Obviously, a lot of people are excited about this. Some people are not excited about this. The huge political debates that were happening around 2016 are starting to crank up again on Facebook. I'm going to have a hard time kind of keeping myself out of it, maybe, or just being surgical about my opinions. I don't know. I mean, I think that Bernie is the most visible progressive candidate. He's problematic on some levels for me and for some other people. He's problematic for a lot of people of color. He also has problematic stances on what's going on in Venezuela as far as regime change, Maduro. He's also repeated the Russian hoax, bullshit myth that's been going on. A lot of people are upset at him about that. He says some goofy things once in a while that are not, that piss people off. All that being said, I think his platform is more progressive than the mainstream Democratic establishment, more progressive. He also actually does things. He actually writes bills and sponsors them and sometimes gets them through the Senate. He actually, hold on, I have a problem going on here. He, pushed Amazon to raise their minimum wage to $15. He's, he has progressive ideas and he actually gets them, at least tries to get them done. And I appreciate that. He's, he seems to be a person of action. And he has the biggest name recognition, probably the most popularity among Democratic candidates right now. We'll see how it plays out. I'm not throwing my hat in anybody's ring right now, but he certainly seems to be most likely a favorite, and that's a good thing because it's going to push the agenda to the left. It's going to it's going to force the Democratic Party to the left. Just the conversation, in the same way that AOC is doing that. Whatever you feel about her aside, just the fact that she's bringing up certain issues is forcing people to address these issues and forcing, my dog is untying my shoe with her teeth, forcing certain people, certain issues to be cast into the mainstream discussion, which I think is absolutely necessary, because they're trying their best to not let people, discuss climate change or the Green New Deal or, whatever. They're trying their best to squash all these ideas. So the more people talking about that, the better. Moving on to a good piece from James Howard Kunstler. This might be a bit of a mind blow for you, for the middle of the road liberals. And so now this is called Worms Turning. James Howard Kunstler is not a right-wing person, nor a alt-right. he's an astute analyst, and I'd say he has a pretty progressive view from what I can fathom, although and I also think that he's tries to stay outside of the left-right paradigm. And so now along comes Andy McCabe, former number 2 at the FBI, publicizing his new book, The Threat: How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump, on this Sunday's CBS 60 Minutes show, confirming what I had said on this blog 2 years ago, that the deep state would try to run over the golden golem of greatness with the 25th Amendment. The specter of Mr. Trump entertained and trained by the nuclear football, the briefcase with launch codes for the World War III, gave U.S. intel communitarians such a case of the heebie-jeebies that they first sought desperately to impede his election by unlawful means, and, failing in that, concocted a fog of Russian collusion conspiracy to cover up all that and much more nastiness emanating from the Hillary Clinton orbit. It's been the opinion here at CFN that Mr. McCabe and a long list of DOJ, FBI, and Intel employees would eventually be summoned to grand juries on charges ranging from lying to their internal affairs colleagues all the way to sedition. Those worms now seem to be turning. Both House and Senate committees investigating the Russia narrative declared that they turned up no evidence for it. And late this week, William Barr was confirmed as a new Attorney General, meaning the extreme case of bureaucratic constipation in that department may be resolving in a shitstorm of counter-revelations and prosecutions and what amounted to an attempted coup d'etat. A lot of the evidence for that is already public and overwhelming. So just going to break this for a second and just say, if you watch CNN, MSNBC, and all the liberal news channels, you get an entirely different story than if you watch, obviously, Fox News or alternative news channels. So I'm a progressive. This is, a climate change channel, but I'm a progressive. So this is a progressive news channel, which means that I stand outside of both of those paradigms and try to look at what's actually happening, and call it how I see it. If the Republicans are guilty of things, and they are guilty of a lot, they should be called out. If the Democrats are guilty of things and they're guilty of a lot, they should be called out. Should not be, what I'm trying to say. A lot of the evidence for that is already public and overwhelming. It includes using FBI counterintelligence assets improperly and illegally, using fabricated opposition research provided by Mrs. Clinton, that would be the Fusion GPS, research to obtain warrants to spy on her election opponent and failing to verify it as evidence, according to strict Woods procedure submitted to FISA court judges. Recruiting Britain's MI6 to spy on U.S. citizens as a workaround from U.S. laws prohibiting U.S. intel from spying on Americans. Setting up the notorious Trump Tower meeting to entrap Donald Trump Jr. using a Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselinitskaya, in the employ of Fusion GPS, Mrs. Clinton's Oppo research contractor, orchestrating leaks of secret FBI proceedings to the news media to feed a Russia collusion hysteria. Malicious prosecutions by special counsel Robert Mueller and egregious political conflicts of interest among Mr. Mueller's team of prosecutors. Cover-up of the Uranium One scheme facilitated by Robert Mueller and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. For those of you that think Rob Mueller is a good guy, he's absolutely not. He lied us into the Iraq war, and he also facilitated this Uranium One deal. You know, for all of those calling, you know, going traitor, traitor to Trump. Yeah, so the Clintons orchestrated a deal to, you know, Russia now owns like 20% of our uranium mines. It actually happened. This is the thing that went down. The deal actually went through, but you know, the liberal people are all like willing to be like, it's fine. No, that never happened. It did happen. It's truth. It's fact. It's factual. It happened. Stop it. Scheme to surreptitiously and illegally record conversations with Mr. Trump once he became president. Conspiring to bury multiple inquiries into illegal contact of Mrs. Clinton and her employers and associates by failing to obtain evidence and allowing it to be destroyed. That actually happened. Misconduct in office by former CIA Chief John Brennan, former National Security Director James Clapper, former AG Loretta Lynch, and members of President Obama's White House inner circle. These matters and a lot more have deserved official attention that was bypassed during the peculiar DOJ regime of former AG Jeff Sessions, and now some light may be about to shine on them. The Trump resistance already seems demoralized by the collapse of the Russian collusion story, which had been the centerpiece of their impeachment hopes. Several reconstituted House committees under the new Democratic Party chairs have pledged to keep mining that vein of fool's gold to keep the hysteria alive long enough for the 2020 elections. But what will happen in the meantime, as their enablers are dragged into the courts of law to answer for their roguery? My guess is that it will drive the resistance to new depths of delusion and eventually derision as its narrative cloak gets shredded in public testimony and their audacious mendacity revealed. The heat from these future events may be so intense and disruptive that it will interfere with the 2020 election. This is very important to understand, that if and when all this stuff comes out, and it looks like it's about to come out, it's going to destroy a lot of the Democratic Party. It's going to, if it comes out in the way, I mean, the Clinton Foundation is a criminal enterprise, and the Clintons are absolutely criminals on many levels. That doesn't mean that Trump isn't a criminal. That doesn't mean that. So now that, you know, Democratic Party has shifted to this new, like, we were trying to sell nukes to Saudi Arabia. So now there's a new, you know, new angle, right? The Russian collusion thing is over. Bam, they're on to another one. We tried to sell nukes to Saudi Arabia, and Trump's tried to facilitate that. I don't know enough about that to actually like go really in depth on that right now, but I see it happening. I saw it in the headlines today, and I was like, oh, they flipped the script really quickly. We'll see if that's true. You know, if whatever, you know, Trump is a major problem for us politically in this country. He's destroying things left and right. He's doing all kinds of, you know, maniacal stuff. Occasionally he does, you know, some things that are okay, but mostly maniacal. And I'm sure that there's plenty of illegal, corrupt things that he has done. You know, he's behind the Maduro thing. He's behind the, you know, the Venezuelan, the U.S. attempt at a coup in Venezuela, which is absolutely ridiculous, and they should be left alone. But we're going full steam, full bore in that, you know, ahead in that mission. However, that does not uh, that doesn't get the Clintons or what Hillary Clinton did with the DNC. That doesn't get them or her off the hook, and she should be on the hook for her improprieties as well. And it looks like all that stuff is going to come out right before the in the next few years along the road to the 2020 election, which is going to make everything look really. Things are going to get really strange. So, like, when we thought that we know that climate catastrophe is upon us, and we don't know whether it's going to be this year or next year or the year after that. Add on top of that the fact that the political landscape is about to get extremely weird, and probably very, very scary. If you thought it was scary already, it's probably going to get a lot scarier. We'll see how this plays out. I am and I will be covering this along the way, because I believe it's important. Obviously, I live in the United States, and this affects a lot of people. It actually affects the globe because we happen to have our fingers in so many pies, and we happen to control so much of the narrative around the world, wrongly, mostly wrongly or rightly. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.